Hi, my name is Rebecca Kern-Lundberry. I'm Ward Laboratories professional animal scientist, and today we're going to talk about mycotoxin testing, what Ward Laboratories now has the capability to test as we've expanded our mycotoxin capabilities, why you would want to test it, and when and how to test it. So first of all, let's just talk about what Ward Laboratories can now test. So as you can see, we've got the feedstuffs here going across the top of the slide, and then what mycotoxins can be tested on each feedstuff going down. And so corn, we have a full panel of mycotoxins available for corn grain. Sorghum, we can run aflatoxin. Wheat grain, we can run aflatoxin, vomitoxin, ochratoxin, and T2 toxin. We can run 3 different mycotoxins on distillers products, aflatoxin, vomitoxin, and fumonisin. And then we can run a limited aflatoxin and DAWN on mixed feed. One thing you'll note is that we do not have the capability to test any forages for mycotoxins. So we're really focusing in on grains and those mycotoxin possibilities being in our more higher risk feeds there. So why should we be testing for mycotoxins? So mycotoxins can be a large cost to livestock producers. Oftentimes it's thought of more in swine and poultry. It's also still a concern when we talk about ruminant species. And a lot of times when we're working with livestock producers here at Ward Labs, they'll call in and they kind of, they're just not thrifty. They're just not performing like I'd like them to. Those are some of the phrases I hear livestock producers use. Usually that means let's dive into mineral nutrition. But we also should be starting to think about mycotoxins, as they also have a lot of really nondescript, just not thrifty, just not thriving. Reproduction rates are dropping, kind of not wanting to eat, feed refusal, some things like that that kind of seem a little bit mysterious. So based on all of that, it's an economic loss. They're a threat to animal health. Some of them are even a threat to human health. And we want to make sure that we have some high quality production, and we want to make sure that the feed is clean in that aspect. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about aflatoxin. This is probably the most widely known mycotoxin and one of the big ones, and the reason we started mycotoxin testing here at Ward Labs. And those of you who have been with us know that we've been testing for aflatoxin for quite a long time now. The thing with mycotoxin is it can develop in the field, as you can see on the photograph shown. It will come with an olive green mold, and then the real kicker with aflatoxin is that it can increase in storage when grains aren't pressed down the way that they need to be to remove all the oxygen, when there's higher moisture and also warm temperatures. The cool thing about aflatoxin and its prevalence, there's been a lot more research done on it. So we do have FDA guidance. So when you test for aflatoxin, you'll get a number and you'll know if an action needs to be taken. Vomitoxin is also one that's very well known. It's called vomitoxin because it is known for causing swine to throw up, and feed refusal is usually associated with that. Vomitoxin really wreaks havoc of their small intestine and can even cause some damage to their livers and kidneys. In poultry, the kidneys is a specific concern. This one mostly occurs in the field when we have a cooler, wetter growing season. Like aflatoxin, vomitoxin has been studied enough to where we have some FDA guidelines. So when you test your feed, you get a number and you'll know what action you need to take. Fumonisin is another mycotoxin that we can test for. This one also has FDA guidance so that you know. This one also is a little bit more nondescript, and so it's going to show up more in, reduced feed intake, reproductive issues, some things that might go under the radar for quite a while before they really start to show up as a decreased production performance. Whoops. And so with fumonisin, this one is also one that occurs mostly in the fields. And specifically in corn during the silking stage during a low moisture, hot growing season. Ochratoxin is also a concern. This one is really a concern when we're talking about chickens when it comes to egg production and egg quality. This one also can be a concern in human health. So if ochratoxin is detected in the feed, it's possible for it to pass on and be in the meat and the eggs. And in human health, this can impact the liver and kidneys just as it does the chicken or other poultry species that you might be feeding. Zearalenone is a really interesting one. It's an endocrine disruptor, so it acts a lot like estrogen. Um, and what we learned from talking with someone who's on the regulatory side of things with beef production is that when zearalenone is present at high enough levels in the feeds, it can sometimes, on those animals that are on the all natural programs, it can show up as though they can test positive like they have an implant. And so it's really important to make sure that that's not in our feed stuff and impacting, our fertility of our livestock and also showing up on those all natural programs. We want to make sure that everything's clean and going the way that it needs to go. T2 toxin, this one is a really big one. It's considered the most toxic of all the mycotoxins. Vomiting, feed refusal. So a lot of times it might get confused and people are thinking it's vomitoxin, but it actually is T2 toxin. The interesting one part about this one is that it is also absorbed through the respiratory tract. So even just having it in the dust in the feed can cause an impact on the animal. And it's also really important, if your feed does test positive for T2, to make sure you're handling it in such a way that it keeps the dust down, not only for your animals, but also for your own health. This one also can increase with storage like aflatoxin. So we need to be careful with that one, but under cooler and wetter conditions. So when should we be testing for mycotoxins? Of course, monitoring is always going to be the best form of prevention. So when you receive new lots of feed, when you start feeding something that has been sitting in storage for a while, and then also after you've mixed those diets, if there's any concern with ingredients that went in, then it's going to be a really good idea to test them coming out when we're talking about swine and poultry diets. Unfortunately, since forages, we can't test that. We wouldn't say we can't do that. So then troubleshooting, like I said, a lot of times when we get calls from customers of just not thrifty, not thriving animals, then we want to address that unexplained illness. We can dive into mineral nutrition. We also should be looking at what feeds potentially are carrying mycotoxin risk. So how to take a sample. So it's really important to take a good representative sample and not just sample one area of that pile of feed or in storage. And so making mycotoxins are spotty throughout. So we just want to make sure that we're sampling the best that we can, coming up with a good composite sample to get accurate results that can justify action if any needs to be taken. And so with that, we want to make sure, the difficulty with this type of feed when it's in storage, it's hard to access it. So the best time to be sampling is when it's in motion while it's being put into storage, as it's being pulled out of storage, and then taking random increments and combining that as your sample that you would then submit to the lab. When you're taking a representative sample, you want to make sure that you do use sample handling tools. Using your hand, you're going to lose a lot of the fine particles and potentially underrepresent how much mycotoxin is in that feed. When you are choosing sampling tools, it's important to choose the correct tool to pick up whatever material it is that you're sampling, right? So the example here, they're sampling this material that has big particles and small particles, but these big particles aren't going to be picked up because the tool is too small to pick them up. And then, sampling down into something, here you see the fines have settled at the bottom. This is a a big concern, this sampling tool isn't going to pull them up. So, and things have been segregated. So you want to make sure that when you're sampling, you're choosing a tool that's going to help you with that, whether it's a cup or a shovel or whatnot. As things are flowing off the truck, then pull your multiple subsamples. And then if that's more than a quart-sized Ziploc bag, which is what we at the lab want, then you're going to need to reduce the mass on that. What we would recommend for you guys at home is fractional shoveling. It doesn't require any extra equipment. You just dump the sample out, kind of get it laid out how best you want, and then use one of your sampling tools. Usually like a square shovel scoop is going to work best. Shovel from different areas of that pile that's been laid out, and then that's your sample that you're going to send to us. Once the sample arrives here, if we have to do any further mass reduction, we're going to use a riffle splitter. And I would recommend that you check out some of the AFCO guidelines and see how would be best for your specific situation. And you can always call the lab and ask for some guidance that way too. So with that, I would just like to say thank you for checking out and learning some more about our capabilities for testing for mycotoxins and why you should be testing for mycotoxins. My name's Rebecca Kern-Lunbury. I'm our professional animal scientist. We also have Stephanie Wooten on staff. She's a microbiologist who can help you to interpret your results as well. And we sure look forward to hearing from you.